Part 1.
First, you have some time to look at the questions, 1 through 5.
Dr. Barrett.
Sammy, come in. Is Irene with you?
Yes.
Good. Sit down. Right. We're looking at how far you've got with your research project since we last met. You decided to do a survey about computer facilities at the university, didn't you?
That's right. We decided to investigate the university's open access to a computer when they need one, so we thought it would be a useful area to research.
Good. It's not a topic anyone has looked at before, as far as I know, so it's a good choice. So what background reading did you do?
Well, we looked in the catalogs in the library, but we couldn't find much that was useful. It's such a specialized subject. Hardly anything seems to have been published about it.
And as well as that, the technology is all changing so quickly.
But the Open Access Center has an online questionnaire on computer use that it asks all the students to do at the end of their first year, and the supervisor gave us access to that data. So we used it as a starting point for our research. It wasn't exactly what we needed, but it gave us an idea of what we wanted to find out in our survey. Then we designed our own questionnaire.
And how did you use it?
We approached students individually and went through our questionnaire with them on a one-to-one basis.
So you actually asked them the questions?
That's right. We made notes of the answers as we went along, and actually we found we got a bit of extra information that way as well, about the underlying attitudes of the people we were interviewing by observing the body language and things like that.
How big was your sample?
Well, altogether we interviewed a random sample of 65 students, 55% male and 45% female.
And what about the locations and times of the survey?
We went to the 5 open access computer centers at the university, and we got about equal amounts of data at each one. It took us 3 weeks. We did it during the week, in the day and in the evenings.
Not the weekends?
No.
So presumably your respondents were mostly full-time students.
Yes. Oh, you mean we should have collected some data at the weekends from the part-time students? We didn't think of that.
Okay. It's just an example of how difficult it is to get a truly random sample. So how far have you got with the analysis of results?
Well, everyone agrees there was a problem, but we're more interested in what they think should be done about it. The most popular suggestion was for some sort of booking system. About 77% of the students thought that would be best. But there were other suggestions. For example, about 65% of people thought it would help if the opening hours were longer, like 24 hours a day.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10.
Choice 1. Listen to the following talk and choose the correct answer for each question.
The Atlantic Ocean named for the legendary lost island of Atlantis, has made up for the romantic origin of its name by becoming the most important commercial highway in the world, yet traces of romance continually mingle with the business of the sea. For instance, the Spanish adventurers who first sought gold and silver in America frequently found their ships becalmed, usually on the edge of the steady trade winds, about 30 degrees north or south latitude. A sailing ship could carry only so much water, and as it lay motionless under a hot sun for days or weeks, the tortures of thirst were agonizing. The horses were generally the first victims. They had to be thrown overboard when they died or became crazed with thirst. Because the Spanish caballeros thought highly of their horses, even crediting them with souls, they suffered great remorse and believed the ghosts of the proud war horses were haunting the scene. They saw the restless spirits in their dreams and related their dreams to sailors. Whenever the mariners passed that way, they would see in the spray or clouds images of wild horses bearing down on them. They began to call the broad belts of calm the horse latitudes, the romantic name by which they are known today.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 2. You will hear a tour guide, Lou Miller, speaking to a group of people about a boat trip they are going to take around the Australian island of Tasmania. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
So, hello everyone. My name's Lou Miller and I'm going to be your tour guide today as we take this fantastic boat trip around the Tasmanian coast. Before we set off, I just want to tell you a few things about our journey. Our boats aren't huge, as you can see. We already have 3 staff members on board, and on top of that, we can transport a further 15 people, that's you, around the coastline. But please note, if there are more than 9 people on either side of the boat, we'll move some of you over. Otherwise, all 18 of us will end up in the sea. We've recently upgraded all our boats. They used to be jet black, but our new ones now have these comfortable dark red seats and a light green exterior in order to stand out from others and help promote our company. This gives our boats a rather unique appearance, don't you think? We offer you a free lunchbox during the trip, and we have 3 types. Lunchbox 1 contains ham and tomato sandwiches. Lunchbox 2 contains a cheddar cheese roll. And Lunchbox 3 is salad-based and also contains eggs and tuna. All 3 lunchboxes also have a packet of crisps and chocolate bar inside. Please let staff know which lunchbox you prefer. I'm sure I don't have to ask you not to throw anything into the sea. We don't have any bins to put litter in, but Jess, myself or Ray, our other guide, will collect it from you after lunch and put it all in a large plastic sack.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
The engine on the boat makes quite a lot of noise, so before we head off, let me tell you a few things about what you're going to see. This area is famous for its ancient lighthouse, which you'll see from the boat as we turn past the first little island. It was built in 1838 to protect sailors, as a number of shipwrecks had led to significant loss of life. The construction itself was complicated, as some of the original drawings kept by the local council show. It sits right on top of the cliffs in a very isolated spot. In the 19th century, there were many jobs there, such as polishing the brass lamps, chopping firewood, and cleaning windows that kept lighthouse keepers busy. These workers were mainly prison convicts until the middle of that century, when ordinary families willing to live in such circumstances took over. Some of you have asked me what creatures we can expect to see. I know everyone loves the penguins, but they're very shy and unfortunately tend to hide from passing boats. But you might see birds in the distance, such as sea eagles, flying around the cliff edges where they nest. When we get to the rocky area inhabited by fur seals, we'll stop and watch them swimming around the coast. They're inquisitive creatures, so don't be surprised if one pops up right in front of you. Their predators, orca whales, hunt along the coastline too, but spotting one of these is rare. Dolphins, on the other hand, can sometimes approach on their own or in groups as they ride the waves beside us. Lastly, I want to mention the caves. Tasmania is famous for its caves, and the ones we'll pass by are so amazing that people are lost for words when they see them. They can only be approached by sea, but if you feel that you want to see more than we're able to show you, then you can take a kayak into the area on another day, and one of our staff will give you more information on that. What we'll do is to go through a narrow channel, past some incredible rock formations, and from there we'll be able to see the openings to the caves, and at that point we'll talk to you about what lies beyond.
That is the end of Part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 2.
Now turns to Part 3. Part 3.
You will hear part of a talk on cultural research.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26.
Having referred briefly to the general definition of culture, I want to move on to an example of cultural research in action, a real example of what researchers into culture are doing. This is a study done in 2004 into the global teenager hypothesis. Now, the global teenager hypothesis states that the values and attitudes of teenagers all over the world have become very similar, that teenagers are part of a global culture, rather than a national or a regional one. This study investigated the subject of materialism in 3 different cultures. It asked if teenagers' attitudes to materialism were similar or different in those 3 different cultures. I'd like to go through the main points of this study because I think it demonstrates the interest and usefulness of this kind of research. The research took a sample of 556 high school students of between 14 and 17 years of age from 3 countries. The 3 countries, being also 3 differing cultures, were China, Japan, and the USA. The high schools were in medium-sized cities, and the students came from middle-class areas. There were 172 respondents from China, 168 from Japan, and 216 from the USA. The students were asked to reply to a questionnaire or survey, which consisted of 7 statements. They were asked to say if they agreed or disagreed with the statements. The questionnaire was filled in during the students' regular class time. I'll give you some examples of the statements in the questionnaire. And, by the way, if you want to look into this in further detail, I've got the reference here. Let me see. Oh yes, it's the International Journal of Consumer Studies, Volume 28, Number 4, of September 2004. The first statement was, "It is really true that money can make you happy." Respondents were asked, as they were asked about all the statements, to give their answer on a scale of 1 to 7. 1 on the scale indicated, "I strongly disagree." 4 on the scale was neutral. And 7 on the scale was, "I strongly agree." The second statement was, "My dream in life is to be able to own expensive things." And the 5th was, "Having the right possessions is the most important thing in life." Let's look at some of the results.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30.
I'm sure.
Let's look at some of the results. With regard to the first statement, it was the Japanese teenagers who agreed most strongly that money could make you happy. The Americans were second, and the Chinese agreed least. However, regarding one's life dream being to own expensive things, it was American teenagers who agreed most strongly with this, and the Chinese who agreed least. As regards the 5th statement about owning the right things, the Americans agreed less strongly than the other 2 groups. It was the Chinese who agreed most strongly with this statement. I haven't been able to analyse all aspects of the study in this lecture, but it does suggest that the hypothesis is not supported by the data. It may be that the culture of the USA is more individualistic, whereas the Chinese culture is more collectivist or communitarian. However, it does not seem to support the global teenager hypothesis. As always, this is something on which we need to carry out more research.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. Listen to the introduction about Tower Bridge and complete the summary.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Tower Bridge is located in one of the most interesting parts of London. On either top of the tower, you can get a bird's-eye view of the wonderful scenery all round Tower Bridge. On its south side are many tall old buildings. On its north side stands the Tower of London itself. But Tower Bridge, the first bridge over the Thames, as you travel to London from the sea, is the most famous of them all. Although they look the same age, the tower is almost 1,000 years old, and Tower Bridge, which was built in the 1890s, is just over 100. Because of the tall ships up and down the Thames, it was proposed in 1850 that a bridge across the Thames near the tower was most necessary. However, the designers argued about the new bridge for about 30 years. They took so long because they had two big problems. One is that the new bridge must look like the old tower, and the other is that the bridge must not look like a modern bridge. They made it look like the old tower, so everyone was happy. Besides, the most surprising thing about Tower Bridge is that it opens in the middle, while big ships are going through to the Pool of London. If you're lucky enough to see the bridge with its two opening arms high in the air, you'll never forget it. The bridge took 8 years to build and cost £900,000, a lot of money in those days. But it was a wonderful success and became a famous tourist attraction in London on the day when the bridge was completed. 100 years ago, the Thames was once London's busiest traffic route, so that the bridge opened at least 12 times a day. Today, big ships don't go so far up the Thames. Tower Bridge opens perhaps only twice a week, but the same wonderful machinery is still in good condition. Green, yellow and red, the colourful wheels and engines look smart and new, not 100 years old. They still lift the two heavy opening arms, each 1,000 tons, leaving 70 metres for the ships to go through. And they still can open and close the bridge in 1.5 minutes. Things are changing greatly now at Tower Bridge. The horses that used to help with pulling have gone, and so have the tugs, for they're no longer necessary. The walkways from one tower to the other at the top of the bridge were closed years ago because so many people jumped off them into the Thames, which is said to open again soon. In addition, the beautiful wheels will be part of a special exhibition for the public to visit. There'll be a restaurant in one of the towers and a pub in the other. But whatever happens in its exciting future, Tower Bridge will always mean London.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.